Assembling my $1,000 gaming PC build, how to put together a computer. Guys, my parts are finally here for my $1,000 gaming PC build. In the last video I showed you how I selected all the parts, what's the specific reasoning behind it, and now we are all going to put everything together in this tutorial. But first, a word from today's sponsor, and that's Lexa and the THOR DDR4 memory. Guys, a lot of gamers and professionals already use Lexa products to work quickly and efficiently, and that's because Lexa has a large selection of innovative storage and lots of different memory products. If you want, you can also discover Lexa in your next PC build or upgrade project. Much the same way I'm doing in this PC build tutorial. Guys, I have ordered everything step by step, and you can use the navigation here in the video. I have the unboxing part, and then we just install the power supply. So prepping the case, that's really one of the easiest. And if you want some reasoning why I selected the parts for this $1,000 build that I did, please watch the previous video, part 1. Prepping the case, very easy, simple and straightforward to do. And that's why we don't just go ahead and look at the power supply. There are screws in the case as well as included with the power supply. Please use these with the power supply, I think that's the best. This fractal case, I have a fractal case and a fractal power supply. Very nice airflow in here. Just install the power supply at the bottom. That's actually much more beneficial to have that power supply, a case of the power supply at the bottom than at the top. That gives you some cooling advantage. We're using the AM4 platform, and I have a B550 Aorus AM4 Ryzen gaming motherboard for this build that has a 12+ 2-phase power design with these DRMOS VRMs, so it's not the older gen VRMs. It's a very nice power design that board has. And yes, you could argue for Ryzen 5600X with just 65 watts, it's a little bit over designed. But guys, I picked this Aorus motherboard intentionally. If you want to later put in a bigger CPU, or maybe you want to have an X3D, this motherboard will be more than enough. So just put in the CPU into the socket. There's like these small markers here. That's very easy. The old AM4 platform, I kind of like those because they have a different socket. I think this is easier to install than with the AM5. With the AM5, you have to be a little bit more careful because the pins are designed differently. Having said that, quickly installing the RAM sticks, and since this is supported by Lexa, and Lexa was so kind to provide these THOR DDR4 memory, these have actually really nice timings, CL16 timings, so I'm very happy. Also nice gray design with the heat spreader. But there's one small thing that you might have noticed. I'm always putting them into the second slot. And why do you place them actually there? I have made this small diagram here. Yeah, these CPUs essentially have a 2-channel memory controller, as you see here, A and B. And if I show you side by side, you can see you put them in A2 and B2 so that the memory is actually terminated, because that's like, I think what's the right term, daisy chained. It's going through. If you would to put it in bank 1 in B1, it wouldn't be terminated. So please do it like I'm showing it to you here. The memory, that's all high frequency stuff, and on the AM5 boards they even have changed the design there. But without diving too deep into it, let's jump next to the cooler. And again, Coolio was so kind to provide me with their P60T, which is a little bit hard to get, but an equivalent, some would be the Thermalrights, of which there are also different versions. There are a lot of people who just go with the stock cooler. So if you wanted to save a couple bucks, you could go with the stock cooler. But as you may notice, the stock cooler is significantly smaller. The fan is smaller, the cooling element is smaller. And there's also one thing I want to really point out, that this thermal pad at the bottom, if you decide to use that stock cooler, maybe this thermal pad, in my opinion, is somewhat sticky. So if you wanted to switch or upgrade the fan later on, I think it's much safer to just remove the original thermal pad and use some high quality thermal paste such as the Arctic. Because allegedly some people reported problems removing the stock cooler when using the original thermal pad. So now that you know some CPU cooler differences, let's jump straight to the CPU cooler install. I'm speeding this up a little bit here and show you some detailed close-up shots of the parts that I use. So you use these standoffs, and then what I would recommend you is take the screws, put them on one side, and then you can put the adapter plate very comfortably in there, and you insert the screws on the other side. And guys, these coolers are compatible with AM4 and AM5, but if you buy a cooler, just check beforehand to make sure. Usually both work, and I'm speeding this up again. Next, we put in the NVMe. I found it a little bit more convenient to put in the NVMe SSD before actually installing the CPU cooler. There are different types of NVMe SSDs. I'm going to do some comparison videos on this as well. Right now, we're using one that has no cooling element, which is no problem because one is included with the motherboard. However, some of the more affordable motherboards, they don't have that, so you want to select your NVMe accordingly. Now, applying the thermal paste. Just take a small pea-sized amount, not too much, not too little, approximately like I showed to you here in the video. I'm also going to zoom out for you a little bit. When it comes to the cooler, guys, this is a very oversized cooler for the CPU that we are using. You by no means have to use one that's that big. I told you can use the stock cooler if you wanted to, but in general, I think it's best to oversize everything a little bit so that the system runs cooler and quieter. Now, once the motherboard prep is finished, you can take the whole assembled portion and put this into the case. Again, make sure to use the correct screws that are included with your case. Sometimes there are different screws in the case, and use the correct numbering. I have a little bit special tools here from Vera, the German Vera brand, with a special laser tip. I just wanted to test that. I really like the laser tip, but they are not holding the screws as good as my old screwdriver, so a little bit disappointing there. But guys, I'm speeding this up again. Don't over tighten it, just put it in. What's the right word, guys? Hand tight with a moderate amount of force. But why don't we just showing you the most important part to wire everything correctly. So here you see the power supply cable. That's the motherboard side. It has one big connector. If we flip that around and look on the other side, you can see, on the power supply side, it has two. So please check with your power supply the included cables. I have made this overview graph right here. You connect the ATX and the 12 volt ATX, and I also highlighted again in red the MOSFETs. That's basically this 12 plus 2 phase that I mentioned earlier. This is also a little bit oversized VRMs, and those VRMs slash the MOSFETs, they have a higher efficiency, therefore run cooler at a lower load. So that's good that it's a little bit oversized. The finished product on the back, guys, I'm covering this up anyway. If you want to route the cables or make it a little bit nicer, look nicer, you can do that. Certainly, I used some of these Fractal included Velcro straps. But the most important thing obviously is the front side where you look onto the board. That should look very nice. And I marked with you the front connectors for both the audio and all these USB-C, USB plugs. That's how I wired it. In your case, depending if you also have a Fractal case or another one, it might look slightly different. However, it should be relatively similar, and I really highly encourage you download the manual beforehand or glance over the manual so that you have that available should any questions arise. Important also is the power LED and power switch is probably the most important. That can also look slightly different based on which computer PC case you have. That's how it looks with the Fractal, and I'm using this Gigabyte adapter here. Moving on to installing the graphics card. Guys, probably the easiest and most satisfying part to do. I have this big GeForce RTX right here. Fits in very nicely in the case. 4070 and 4080 should work as well, but you can always double check if you want to. And guys, that was really easy, really nice build, relatively fast. Cyberpunk, some decent RGB, a little bit RGB, but not overkill RGB. And my particular highlight is really the Asus ROG Strix graphics card, the RTX 4060, with this very nice cyberpunk RGB effect, which I personally find very pleasing to the eye. And guys, as you have seen, PC build, doing your own PC build, really not that difficult. I hope you can find some good deals, maybe on the Black Friday sale that's coming up soon. What we're gonna do in part number 3 is now we're gonna run some benchmarks and test this AM4, a little bit of a premium budget build against let's say an AM5 system, test it with different graphics cards. What I really want to do is see what happens, for example, if I benchmark this system, or if I later put in an even bigger graphics card, what are the differences? So let's do some benchmarks in part 3. I see you as a subscriber, and in the next video.